Hi, we're live. Okay, so I grounded before I started this live stream because this is very important. This is very important for all of us as humanity, and it is really, really, really important for us as women. So I have two cameras going. I've got my Instagram on my phone hooked onto my laptop, and I got my laptop up so I can be live on Facebook and in Zoom so that I can use this recording on YouTube. Okay, so we're all set. Now, I have something pretty incredible to share with you. And I already was sharing it with you in February when I started reading this book, The Great Cosmic Mother. And the reason why I was sharing an unpolished version of it was because I knew that it was about, like, this book gives us a really concise history of what happened in civilization when we were established with a system that revolved around hierarchy, war, and capitalism. And the system that we had before, especially with the feminine, was revolved around the menses, so our menstrual cycle, and the moon. So when I started reading this book, I was like, okay, like I'm a very intentional person. And even one of the guys at the gym today, he's like, why are you so focused? You're walking like this. I'm like, I don't know, because I'm a focused person. I was thinking about the planets. So I'm very intentional in pretty much everything that I do. Of course, there's blind spots. But my intention with this was that I am going to live in alignment and step into the complete messiness that goes along when you're processing emotions. And the reason why I shared them publicly was because as a manifesting generator, 6-2, the 6-2 leadership style is leading from example. And it's very easy to see that with my fitness, that I've got my food under control. I've got my emotions under control to deal with food. I've got my body, and like all those things have like worked themselves out, right? So I share from experience what has helped me. So while I was reading this, I was very intentional that I wanted to share what was going on so that I could lead from example, because I also knew that eventually I was going to be processed and regulated through the atrocities or about the atrocities of the patriarchy, so that when I would be speaking like this, I could refer people back to the earlier days in February of this year so that they could see this is not a pleasant experience at all. It is a horrifying, it is a horrific experience, because part of the process of decolonizing yourself is that you find out that the patriarchal standards are standards that you have been indoctrinated with and you end up actually living by, judging other people by, and judging yourself by. So the process that has happened through civilization in at least the last 2,000 to 3,000 years is in our cells. It is in our bodies. And the feminine reclamation work that you're seeing so many women doing, I don't know how deep women are going. I've seen a lot of women kind of stop at the sacral chakra and reclaiming their sexuality, but there is so much further to go in this reclamation work. And you know what I also don't like? I don't like talking with my hands. I want to put my hands down. I don't like talking with my hands. I think it looks silly. Okay, so what I am going to be doing, if you dare to go on this adventure with me, as Kevin would say, from Melanie and Laird's boyfriend, you have a choice. I mean, obviously you can keep scrolling and you can unfollow, you can comment really atrocious things if you disagree with what I'm saying. I do not care, because I know the astrology, I know my bloodlines, and I know what this all means. And I am in a position in this time in history that I'm not going to be burned at the stake for what I'm going to say. So I'm going to say it, whether you like it or not. And if you're a troll, watching it. Okay. So let's get into this. I want to share with you the books that I read, because the books that I read stem from archaeology to consolidated history like this one, And then also Jungian psychology, because that is what really helps us understand that we are experiencing an evolution of consciousness. And the reason why it doesn't feel like an evolution of consciousness is because there is, in fact, a system that is rigged, that has been rigged for a very long time to keep us from knowing that this is all about us on an individual, selfish level, even though it's not selfish when you actually start living in alignment with these original principles. It is about us and the symbology that, or like the correlations that we have between astrology, especially the outer planets, and how every time they move, civilization moves. With astrology and with Jungian psychology, deep psychology of like what it is to develop consciousness through the different ages and stages of our lives, and comparatively with the ages and stages of civilization. And so that's why I'm able to talk about this right now without being upset about what has happened. So let's get into, oh yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to share with you a bunch of books. We're starting with this one. Now, the reason why we're starting with this one is because it was the first one that I read. I devoured this, and devouring is actually a term that is used to talk about the feminine nature. So the reason why I want to start with this and why I want to introduce this to you and encourage you to read it for yourself is because it starts from a scientific basis that scientists believe that we all started from water, that we existed as a single cell organism, and through growth and evolution, we became more and more advanced species. Now, I don't care about any of the alien theories that when our chromosomes changed and all of a sudden brain activity skyrocketed. I mean, some people say that it was alien interaction with DNA. Some people say that it was because monkeys were eating mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, and they were having these psychedelic experiences, and that's what transformed their consciousness. I don't care about that part. What I'm sharing with you is that the water is also something that is associated with feminine energy. Water is feminine in the symbology of it. So if we go back with this book to the beginning, that we came from water, simultaneously we have things in mythology, and mythology is what helps us understand and get through the human conditioning. It's the way that we interpret things, it's the meaning. And so if you're into personal development, you know that Tony Robbins talks about humans are meaning makers. So mythology is the kind of like is the meaning behind the things that we see in science and archaeology and anthropology. So the beginning of this book starts with, we all came from water. And feminine aspect of a female species in this very ancient development of becoming a species is that the feminine energy actually had two polarities, masculine and feminine. And so that means that it was able to reproduce itself without the exterior semen or masculine energy. Now, this is really, really, really important, especially because right now, the things that we are experiencing with transgender and gender identity. And the reason why those subjects are difficult to talk about from a scientific perspective is because when you mention how toxic our bodies are, and that the phthalates from plastic that is in a woman's body while she's pregnant actually inhibits the genetic marker for testosterone to be the primary hormone in male bodies. So that is technically, from a scientific level, why so many men feel they are in the wrong body. But when you talk about that, not everybody, a lot of people who are like pro transgender and against this administration get really upset that we're being insulting, or somebody who's talking it from a scientific perspective, being insulting and not caring about people's feelings. But that like goes hand in hand with, there are multiple ways that we have to observe our experience. There's the mythology of the meaning that we give it, there's the archaeology, and there's the science and the anthropology, the study of the cultures. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because everything that we are experiencing right now can be resolved on each one of us on an individual inner work level, inner alchemy level, if we actually understand what the beginning symbology meant before the system got rigged. So before the system got rigged and the symbology was that the feminine was androgynous, there are statues of feminine deities that have a penis. And it wasn't that the woman was a hermaphrodite, and it wasn't about a male body. It was using that male body part to symbolize that the woman was generative on her own. She has the masculine and the feminine frequencies already within her. And that brings us into the Sophia Gaia mythos. And the reason why the Sophia Gaia mythos is important relative to other creation stories, maybe like from India or from Africa, is because the Sophia Gaia mythos is from the Fertile Crescent. And the Fertile Crescent is where we have the origins of the rigged system, the patriarchal religions that made an external male deity, that was a hierarchy, that if you did not believe in that particular male god, you know what happens, and it's happening still. Whereas the goddess religion was, we had all different depictions of the goddess to help us with all the facets of life. So there's all these statues of women with penises symbolizing that we were able to do it all. And you know how sometimes guys get weird when we don't need them. So the Sophia Gaia's principle, that creation story is so important because it was the creation story that really taught us how to be autonomous, how to manage our energy, and how to create our life on our terms, and how to work interdependently. So the Sophia Gaia mythos got suppressed. Elements of it were taken so that these patriarchal religions could have control. So there's lots of creation stories that are very similar to the Sophia Gaia, but the Sophia Gaia is the important one, in my opinion, because this is the one from the lands of which the patriarchy started. That's my homeland. The Fertile Crescent is my bloodlines. So what we want to really look at is that we have to be able to expand our mind and go back and forth between what was actual original science of how things started, and then what was the mythology, what was the archaeological symbology, and how can we say that, or how can we look at the reasons why people are fighting and being murdered today is actually a very divine principle. And the more that we can start to see the divinity within each and every subject, the less we are going to be reactive within ourselves, and the less we are going to be emanating this patriarchal signal. And you know that when there is a higher vibration coming from a person's heart, it has the ability to affect thousands around it. So I believe that if our physical body is not in harm's way because of what is currently happening, then it is our job, that this is our lane that we need to get in to change the energy in our bodies. And then if we are an entrepreneur, make as much money as possible to help turn the tides. And that's like what my goal is and what my intention is for how I live my life. So let's keep going on this, okay? So I really encourage you to read this book. So first of all, we find out that scientists, what we believe about science, that we all evolved from a single cell within the ocean, is mythologically the same thing, because early species were able to regenerate themselves without an exterior semen or masculine substance. And Sophia Gaia in that creation story is that Sophia, the wisdom, the frequency, otherwise known as masculine in the quantum physics, wanted to experience life with spontaneity, without having order, with having the element of surprise. And so she left the logos, and the logos has been changed to just mean God in a lot of ways. But logos is math, logos is geometry, logos is the organized structure behind everything that manifests. So she decides, I want to go create without order. I want to see what happens out of the element of surprise. So her frequency, right? Because we know when it's a higher frequency, it's a thought. And when it's a lower frequency, it's a thing. It materializes, it's matter. So she lowers her frequency into Gaia, which Gaia means earth in Greek, and Sophia means wisdom in Greek. So wisdom became matter. She materialized. And she materialized without the organizing structure. And because there isn't an organizing structure, because there's an element of unknowing, we get chaos and we get the underworld. Hell, before it became H-E-L-L, was H-E-L. She was a goddess that helped people when they died go through their emotions and their light body to then be born again. And the reason why now I'm sharing this with you is because if you read, and I'm telling you, if you educate yourself on this, you can have a conversation like this. What we find out is that part of the unconscious, the underworld, the darkness, the negative, was that the patriarchal religions got obsessed with outliving death. So you see how we're working so hard to have everlasting life in heaven. But the everlasting life is actually cyclical and perpetual, which is why we have the 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏, the original symbol throughout the entire earth about what life is all about, the snake eating itself, that we are self-sustaining, that we are regenerative, that every experience is cyclical. And the sad thing, there's lots of sad things, but one of the sad things about how the patriarchal religions got obsessed with outwitting death was that because Sophia Gaia is frequency and matter, they cut her in half. And the more you read, right, archaeology, anthropology, science, and mythology, the more you can see that the stories are actually written in the Old Testament of separating the upper and the lower waters. But if you're like me and you went to a Christian school and you went to church, those guys don't even know what that story is actually about. They're not going to what happened in civilization before the Old Testament religion was established. So why are we listening to them? But the upper and lower waters are actually the feminine principle. So with the separation of the upper and lower, right? Because water, remember, is a feminine symbology. So it's not necessarily an actual water. But separating the upper and lower put the high frequency, Sophia, the masculine aspect, what we perceive to be the God aspect, on a pedestal. And then the lower aspect of the underworld, of the darkness, of the negative space, that something becomes something. Like when you pour slip into a mold for a mug, and then you fire that mold in the kiln, and then you glaze it, and then you fire it again, and now you can drink out of it. That's the negative space. The mold is the negative space of which something can become something. But they made the negative space bad because it's chaotic, because it's emotional, because you cannot control it. So for these religions to get established, they had to do away with everything that had to do with feminine symbology. And not only in the separation of the feminine symbology, they changed it to be that Sophia was actually masculine. And this is how part of how we got the external male god deity, of which we have to perform for to earn a seat in heaven. So if you're tracking and you've done emotional regulation work, you've done work around attachment trauma, if this symbology of how life actually works was suppressed because we were cut off from it, what happens when you're not connected to your nervous system? What happens when you're not connected to your heart? We need our brain and our heart to be together. So in essence, this is the first mind-body split. Because then as these religions developed, especially with Christianity, we were told that the desires of our heart are evil. We were told not to trust ourselves. We were told that we were lowly sinners. And then we're told that if other people don't believe the way we believe, that they're not going to heaven and that they're evil. So when I was reading this stuff, I was furious, obviously, because a lot of what had been driving me was the war that's happening in the Fertile Crescent. Because let's be honest, it's not a war, it's a genocide. And would you believe Palestine, as one of the 12 tribes in an archaeological book, was the only tribe that kept a direct connection to source. And it was the other tribes that made it exterior, that you had to like submit and you had to ask. Isn't that a trip? I was like, well, no wonder it is the way it is. If this was the only tribe that actually kept the goddess intact. So I want to share a couple more things to really encourage you to start doing this. This is decolonization work at its finest. Because if you're upset, obviously we're all upset. If you're basing your reactions and your beliefs on what's happening currently right now on the last 5 years, you're not there yet. You got to go deeper. And you got to go before the founding fathers of this country, who were deists, who wanted separation of church and state, who weren't basing the country on family values, which is so much of the red Christian base is saying. They weren't Christians. So that argument doesn't even make sense, but it's used. You have to go to when civilization changed to have hierarchies, poverty, and war. And it came from the patriarchal religions. And then the patriarchal religions became the governing systems. Like they were the governing systems when we were transitioning from being connected to the earth and connected to mythology. But then as time has gone by, religion and politics have separated to where politics is the governing system, but it's all coming from the same place. So when I read about the war aspect of it, right? Because I said, I'm really upset. Well, I have been really upset about the war. Not that I'm not physically upset about it. This is the craziest thing. I feel the most amount of peace in my body that I've ever felt. And I feel so in alignment with what I'm doing and where I'm going to be serving people when I am in this, overflow of abundance. That yeah, like it's still upsetting, but like it's not killing me anymore. So when I read about the war in this, the war aspect that we all suffer from right now, in some beliefs, when you line it all up, remember anthropology, archaeology, mythos, and science, when you read about this from those 4 perspectives and you start to connect the dots, part of the way that these religions were established was if not only they removed the idea that we were all connected and that the earth was mother and she provided things for us, in order for the new world order to root itself, it had to remove the old. And the old was all feminine symbology, female. So anything that had to do with being a woman had to be extinguished. And how that happened was that before these religions were established, tribes of people and women ritualized the menstrual cycle and actually planned a lot of what was going on within the community around a woman's menstrual cycle. Because it is a cycle, because there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Technically, there's 4 stages to a woman's menstrual cycle, but for the purposes of the mythology aspect of it, it's that a woman is regenerating her body every single month. And there was such devout reverence to women because we were able to bleed without dying. Like our bodies were doing these things that looked mystical. Before they knew how semen created a baby, they thought the wind blowing near a woman got her pregnant. They believed that an animal that was near her got her pregnant, the spirit of those things. And so when the woman's period was looked at this is a wound that she doesn't die from, but if we get stabbed and we're bleeding, we can face death. So number 1, there's that. And then number 2, a snake sheds its skin. The lining of the uterus sheds if an egg isn't implanted to have a baby. So the symbology around the snake was actually about the wisdom of a woman, the wisdom of Sophia, because the snake is the closest to the ground that you can get, and it goes underground and it sheds its skin. It lives a life in cycles. So that's part of the reason why we have the symbology in the Garden of Eden that the snake was the devil and it's Eve's fault that we all fell from sin. That story is extracted from a different belief system around snakes and around trees. So why am I saying this? So when women's menses became unclean and we became evil, some of the blood rituals stopped. And one of the blood rituals was that if your womb was not going to support another human being, you put the blood back into the earth as a thank you, because the blood has cells and the cells have nutrition. Blood has nutrition in it. So when women put their blood back into the earth, it created a balance of what was taken from the earth, because we cannot survive unless something else dies. There's just no other way around it. We have to kill, whether it's an animal or a plant, in order to live. And because the Sophia Gaia creation story is that Gaia, Earth, is actually the Great Mother in material form, it was a way to give back to her. But when that practice was taken away by the patriarchal religions, some believe, based on all the evidence, that that's when we had to have war. Because for the mass consumption of the onset of agriculture and creating more than enough to have storage, to have wealth, which became hierarchy, to have balance because women weren't putting their blood back in the earth, war had to be part of it to feed what's called the devouring mother. That's a chapter in this book about the devouring mother and how this aspect of war became necessary. And what is so terrible about this is that all the things that they say is wrong with feminine and female and goddess is a reaction to a victimization. So this devouring mother archetype, you can even read about this in Jungian deep psychology. The devouring mother archetype is that she wants to eat everything. That's why you have all the scary goddesses where she's chopping off men's heads and she's got blood dripping off her tongue. Oh, the feminine's evil. No, actually, the feminine is reacting to the evil that was done to her. So why is this important? Because we cannot solve our problems that we are facing today with the level of intelligence that created it, especially if you just started thinking about this in 2020. that's not enough. It's not even scratching the surface. And what I have done, which some of you know, I have been putting my blood back in the earth. Since February, and reading about this, I was like, okay, let me make it make sense. Biology of Belief, okay? Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about how the molecular environment of our DNA dictates how it's expressed. That means the information that's in the cells, which the DNA is in the cells, whatever is in that on a molecular level, and emotions are molecules secreting from the brain, that's how the DNA expresses itself. So this is why you see people like me who get divorced and get more attractive, because we start to live into alignment, right? Like if we didn't want to be in a marriage or like whatever, we start to reverse age the happier we get. That's epigenetics. That's biology of belief. Now, not only that, our bodies are electric and they are magnetic. They are electric magnetic. So is the earth. So here's how I think about putting my blood back in the earth. That on an electromagnetic level, I am fully connected to the Great Mother, the manifestation of Sophia, the wisdom of the universe. I am physically connected to her now. Well, I'm electromagnetically connected to her now. And I am physically connected to her also. We all are, because we have minerals just like the soil does. Have you looked at the scientist who put her dad's ashes under a microscope and you can see the universe? We're also stardust. We're the whole thing. That's what these patriarchal religions don't want us to know. We are it. We are God. And we have all the creative ability to have the logos of structure, have the wisdom of our experiences, and then the means to manifest our bodies, Gaia, Earth. So here's the crazy thing. It's not so crazy. My menstrual cycle is synced up with the full moon. So my bleed is tapering off right now. So you bet your ass I put my blood in the earth yesterday and looked at the moon. And I say thank you. I charge it and I say thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that I just experienced in the last 28 days. And I really feel like I am connecting to be like, this is where my physical body is. And with my energy, my placements of my human design and my astrology chart, here, Gaia, here, Sophia, here's the physical body that's going to be the magnet, the attractor, and also the thing that is going to radiate this processed, wise, regulated energy so that I can positively impact everybody that I come into contact with. If you go to the gym, you know we were talking about my fuck off energy today. So I'm working on the like actual interpersonal relationship with men. But my signal is that of what a time for us to be alive. We're at a time of great change. And if we're not physically affected by it, how can we make a change? How can we be strategic? And how can we play the long game? Because these planets are going to be really disrupting things for a while. We got a couple more years of this. But if you believe what you say you believe, that you know about astrology and you believe that a lot of it is true and it's used to describe you, and you know that colonization is awful, and you know that there are things that need to be righted, then we're right on time. This is the exact moment that we should all be doing this. One other thing that I want to say is that poverty, is this enough? This is enough. This has been 30 minutes. Clearly, there's a lot to talk about here, but I think that's where I want to leave it because I want to tie it into the caption. And the caption is talking about our Lilith placement. And with Jungian, Carl Jung, with Carl Jung Deep Psychology, he is the first like Western person to bring the mythology into a systemized way to look at it through archetypal elements that are within everybody, every single person. And he actually predicted this time that the feminine would be regenerating, that we would remember how important the emotions are, because we've had a lot of capitalism, becoming, and male energy with colonization. So Carl Jung talks about the transformative character of the feminine. And the transformative character is energetic. It's the mythos, it's the symbology, it's the mindset of how we can really look at things. And Lilith, she may have even been a priestess named Lilith in the Fertile Crescent. And when the tribes made male mascots, and there was essentially like 3 winners of the tribes, and they're the major religions, they made all the priestesses, they made them into prostitutes. So when women were using their sexual spiritual energy and creating change within people, within men, obviously within women also, they made that a slut, a whore. So that's another way that they were able to suppress this information. So Lilith may have actually been a priestess that was one of the casualties of these patriarchal religions. But also she's Lilith, the transformative character, which is more of the mindset aspect. And your Lilith placement is where you are afraid to be too much. In our like normal way of like living our life right now, that energy has a lot to do with too much, because the folklore around it was that she was actually Adam's first wife. And because they were made from the same substance, she wanted to be treated equally, not be subservient to Adam. And because she did not want to be subservient, there's a couple stories that either she left the garden, became angry, made the evil world order that we're up against, that she eats babies. Some people say that she got kicked out of the garden, and then Eve was created from Adam's rib to be subservient from him, where Lilith and Adam were created equally from the same substance, dirt. And dirt had a completely different meaning than what it means today. Dirt is from Mother Gaia. So your Lilith placement, I noticed doing my inner work with my emotions, with my feelings, that my Lilith placement, what it represents, Sagittarius 11th house, spirituality, dogma, religion, that when I reflected on all the ways that I thought when I was a kid, all the things that I noticed that seemed a little bit weird, how many questions I had about religion and about God, how I was dumped in my 20s because I wasn't equally yoked. I didn't have the equal amount of faith that my boyfriend had. So he dumped me. How I denounced God for most of my 20s and then only came groveling back to the idea of a higher power when my gym was about to close. Like, all of that made sense for this Lilith placement. And the deeper that I've gone into my Lilith placement, the deeper I've seen correlations with my lineage, so my bloodline from the Fertile Crescent, and how I have been rejected and shamed for the things that I like on every single level of being a woman. Every single. And then what's so funny about that is Lilith has a lot to do with sexual energy. I cannot tell you, this is gonna sound so bad, like how many times yeah, the sexual stuff kind of sucks, because it's like the conundrum that we have, right, is like men really like having sex with us, but then they also shame us for like how we want to have sex, even though the way we want to have sex brought them pleasure, but then they turn around and like say terrible things to us. It's like, oh my God. So all that stuff like really made sense. So when you're able to look at these placements in your chart and compare them to every aspect of how you feel that you're too much, or the ways that you're afraid to be rejected, or the ways that you feel shame about any aspect of yourself, and then take those emotions of how you feel about it, and then take a look at your childhood and see what emotions were similar, which ones are the match, then you're like, this was perfectly designed. This makes perfect sense. And a lot of us have attachment trauma because we're kind of just like we're reaching this entropy in civilization. We're all have been reaching entropy, like the biggest fragment possible, because in the matriarchal religions, children were raised in community. And I was like, so wait, all of us girls with our daddy issues and attachment trauma and all of the stigma that comes with it and all of the hardships that comes with daddy issues, if these patriarchal religions had never happened, we would have no attachment trauma. It's like, so I was like losing my mind when I was reading this book, because I was like, there are so many ways that women feel bad about ourselves and about our bodies, but these are things that are in us on a cellular level and indoctrinated in us on a mindset level through culture. And it can be resolved. We can look at this and laugh in the face of patriarchy so that we can stay in our lane with our chart to be effective. So read the caption, because I wrote a bunch of stuff in the caption. Leave comments that you agree, that you would disagree, whatever. Say all the things, because I just presented to you a little tour of the patriarchy, an introduction to decolonizing the feminine on the basis of archaeology, anthropology, science, mythology, my lineage from the Fertile Crescent, my experiences, and my charts. It is what it is. I have no attachment to what is going to happen in the comment section. So grow, evolve, grow, evolve. Like, let's move humanity forward. Bye.